Buenas and half a day. Thank you all for being here. The Committee on Self-Determination and Historic Preservation and the Committee on the Guam Buildup will now convene for this joint roundtable hearing. The time is 5:15 in the afternoon. For the record and in accordance with the Open Government's Law, public notice was sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and the Guam Daily Post on Tuesday, April 12, 2022, and the second notice on Monday, April 18, 2022. Notice of today's hearing was also available on the Guam Legislature's website. Joining me today, we have Senators Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, Senator Sabina Perez, Senator Joanne Brown, and Senator Tello Taitagui. We also have representatives from the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the Director, Mr. Walter Leon Guerrero, Ms. Kristen Finney, Ms. Michelle Lestimosa, and Colonel Brian Bearden. Thank you for coming. And then we also have the Department of Agriculture Director, Ms. Chelsea Munya. Okay. So thank you everyone for being here. Good evening. We have called for this joint roundtable hearing together with Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, who is the chairperson of the Committee on Guam Buildup, to provide the community and the listening audience an update on the continued discussions and assessments of the firing range complex and any potential adverse impacts on the environment, aquifer, and any and all other water resources that will impact our island. On August 2021, the Protect Guam Water actively circulated a petition to the United States Senate Committee on Armed Services to immediately withhold funding and halt the construction of the firing range complex. The petition also includes to the U.S. Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, to strongly advocate for the protection of Guam's aquifer by directing the Bureau of Land Management to conduct additional environmental impacts and other necessary assessments concerning the firing range complex on top of the Guam aquifer. The Department of Interior plays a vital role in stewarding public lands, pursuing environmental justice, and honoring the federal government's relationships with the Native people. The live petition already reached 5,097 signatures earlier today, which shies 2,403 signatures from their goal of 7,500. What we would like to bring into perspective for everyone listening in is that the Earth's sources of fresh water are finite. While 2/3 of the world's surface is water, less than 3% is fresh water. Clean and drinkable fresh water is something that we often take for granted because we are under the impression that there will always be fresh water for us to use. But this is not true. We must take care of what we currently have, as there have been instances in which drinkable water is no longer available due to the polluting of the water sources. An example is the Red Hill incident in Hawaii. Within the community, there have been concerns that our island's aquifer may fall into a similar situation, and we are concerned about the possibility of contamination. The possibility of contamination also includes the addition of the firing range complex, which is a danger to the natural resources, which is located on top of the Northern Guam Lens aquifer. The Northern Guam Lens aquifer provides our island community with 85% of its fresh drinking water, and each year up to 6.7 million lead bullets are anticipated to be fired over the aquifer, threatening Guam's primary water source as well as surrounding ocean areas. A study conducted by the United States Environmental Protection Agency has shown a wide range of chemical agents in soils surrounding firing ranges across the United States. Heavy rainfall then causes the chemical agents to seep through and threaten the surrounding area's groundwater supplies. This study is alarming for Guam because the karst limestone topography of the Northern Guam Lens aquifer is highly permeable. This joint roundtable hearing, we continue to discuss and assess the environmental risks of the impending threat of contamination of the aquifer and the future threat of diminished freshwater resources in the Pacific region. Together as a community, we must stand firm and recognize the responsibility we have as Native Chamorros and residents of Guam to remain committed in having our voices and concerns heard. Okay. We do have representatives from Protect Guam Water who will be allowed to submit testimony, and really the intention for this is to be a community dialogue. So if there are anybody that has questions or would like to raise any concerns anytime during this roundtable hearing, just raise your hand or notify me and we will address you, okay? And that goes for you senators as well. So the first person we have signed up is Samantha Barnett, which is the Protect Guam Water leader and PM. Samantha? Samantha, just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Samantha, just a moment. The Vice Speaker has some remarks she'd like to make. Vice Speaker?
Good evening, and thank you very much, Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity to share some opening remarks. Hafide and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and to our youth here, and Dunkle Nasitul Smasi, for being here tonight for this roundtable discussion. I want to begin by thanking the Chair on the Committee on Self-Determination and Historic Preservation for extending me an invitation to convene this joint roundtable hearing. Having one of the highest enlistment rates in the nation, it would be very difficult to find a family in Guam who hasn't served in the military. My grandfather is the late Colonel Juan Muñoz, for whom the Guam National Guard's headquarters, Fort Juan Muñoz, bears his name to honor his contribution to the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II. I am also the proud wife of an Air Force veteran, the mother of an active duty Air Guardsman, a mother-in-law of an Air Guard veteran, and lastly, a grandmother-in-law of a deployed Army soldier. But as a proud daughter of Guam, I also know the difficult fight our people face to preserve our culture and protect our precious but limited resources. Today we will be hearing from Protect Guam Water, an Indigenous youth leadership program under NIHI, providing youth with an opportunity for a hands-on leadership learning program dedicated to protecting Guam's land and water resources. As part of their leadership program, they will be presenting their concerns regarding the military buildups impact on Guam's water resources. I appreciate the questions that you have shared with my office a while back, and as committed, our committee had reached out to Joint Region Marianas to seek those answers. We received those answers on March 21st, and I have also shared I've shared that with the Committee on Self-Determination and Historic Preservation, as well as the representative of Protect Guam Water. And as I understand, the concerns that you will be discussing relate to the firing range complex and DOD's policy on this matter. Is included in the Range Environmental Vulnerability Assessment, which is REVA. I have shared the REVA document with the committee today so that they can better examine your concerns. As chair of the Committee on the Guam Buildup, it is important to me to listen to the concerns of our community, and I'm here to learn more about these issues from our youth. I do want to point out that my committee has been working with Joint Region Marianas as well as the Guam Buildup Office, and on May 10th, 2022, I will be hosting my second informational briefing to provide updates on the current status of the Guam Buildup. At the upcoming hearing, Admiral Nicholson of the commanding officer of Joint Region Marianas, as well as relevant command staff, will be providing a status update on the progress of the military buildup. Similarly, Ms. Vera Tapasnya from the Guam Buildup Office and the director of the relevant government of Guam's regulatory agencies will also provide an update on the government of Guam's response and mitigation efforts as it relates to the overall Guam military buildup. In closing, for me personally, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to be able to hear firsthand from all of you about the concerns you have, the research you have done, and the critical perspective that you bring, as I believe it makes me better prepared for the upcoming informational hearing that I will be hosting. And I would like to extend an undankla nasituus masi to you, Madam Chair, for hosting this hearing also this evening. Sana maasi.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Okay, just to, for the record, our office did not receive the direct letter from, of the questions that were asked by the Department of the Navy from the Director Bojwani and from your office, but we will go ahead and I'll read into the record what the letter says. Thank you for your letter of 31 January 2022. This is Hafaday Director Bojwani, and this is from the Department of the Navy, Joint Region Marianas. Thank you for your letter of 31 January 2022 sent to Mr. Randy Sablan, transmitting a constituents inquiry regarding the U.S. Marine Corps Base Camp Blas live fire training range complex, which is under construction at Northwest Field, Anderson Air Force Base. The following responses to the constituents' questions were coordinated between Joint Region Marianas and Marine Corps Base Camp Blas. Question 1, how many acres in total have been or will be cleared for the firing range complex and other related projects in that area? The response, approximately 187 acres is anticipated to be cleared in support of the live fire training range complex. An estimated 50% of the forecasted total clearing has been accomplished with military construction project P-715 for the known distance ranges project. The final number will depend upon the additional areas cleared after MILCON, which is also known as military construction, P-735 and multi-purpose machine gun range is complete. Approximately 1,000 acres of forest will be enhanced as part of an acre-for-acre mitigation, with 5,234 acres of habitat specifically set aside to support the Marine Corps relocation on Guam. Question number 2, what is the status on construction? Construction at MILCON P-715 for the KDR construction project is anticipated to be completed in 2022. Construction activities associated with mobilization at the MILCON P-735 MPMG range are ongoing, and construction is anticipated to be completed in 2024. Question number 3, when do you expect the ranges to begin operating? The earliest possible date of partial range operation of the KDR is sometime between 2023 and 2024. Question number 4. In several instances, the SEIS notes data that is not yet available and studies not yet conducted, etc. Have all studies, surveys, etc. noted in the SEIS as incomplete been conducted, and is the relevant data now available? We searched the response. We searched the 2015 final supplemental environmental impact statement for keywords related to this question. Would be conducted and pending. And most studies referred to in this way are surveys or studies that are required by regulatory processes to obtain permits or approvals, the details of which are too numerous to mention, and their status of completion varies. In addition, these documents are typically submitted by third parties to regulatory agencies as part of the construction permitting process. The third parties is also known as construction contractors. The study most relevant to confirming environmental analysis at the live fire training range complex is the baseline soil and groundwater data collection during range construction in support of the Range Environmental Vulnerability Assessment, REVA program. REVA is a long-term program to periodically evaluate the risk of off-site mitigation of lead with recommendations for the frequency of range cleanup, including, but not limited to, the harvest of bullets from range beams and improvements to storm water management practices. The collected data will inform the site-specific conceptual model confirming lead containment within the range. The 2015 FSEIS analysis concluded that lead is unlikely to be mobile in Guam's environment. Question number 5. A 2012 EPA report looked at heavy metal residues in soils and in a few cases in groundwater. The results of the study showed that there is a wide range of chemicals and heavy metals that are left in soil, many of which can be mobilized by rain and travel to surrounding areas as well as to groundwater. It goes on to question number 5A. How does the study and others cited in the EPA paper impact the findings of the SEIS in regards to contamination and specifically groundwater and coastal contamination? The response: our subject matter experts have reviewed the report, and although it could be useful for understanding processes indicative of the fate of potential range contaminants, it cannot account for site-specific conditions on Guam and the type of ammunition proposed for the use at the live fire training range complex. The REVA program requires data collection to identify site-specific soil and groundwater conditions to inform models concerning the potential mobility of lead and any necessary contaminant measures within the physical footprint of the live fire training range complex. The link below, and there's a link, the link below contains JRM's 2017 presentation to the Guam legislature, which includes a summary of measures relevant to the live fire training range complex that we plan to implement to protect environmental resources, as well as technical references about groundwater. I would also like to share that the Northern Guam Aquifer Technical Working Group, you'll see into the 2017 presentation, is planning their next meeting for the end of March 2022. The group is an excellent source of information given their expertise, current projects, and long-term interest in sustainable aquifer resources. Question 5B, have any additional measures been taken for mitigation? Environmental measures are detailed in Table 2.8-1 of the 2015 FSEIS and adopted by reference into the 2015 Record of Decision. REVA will be the primary measure to assess the risk of lead migrating beyond the physical footprint of the live fire training range complex. Since the live fire training range complex is distant and down gradient, groundwater flow towards the coast from the nearest potable water production, while further inland, there is no risk to drinking water supplies. Additionally, the live fire training range complex is within the thinnest area of the aquifer that is not a viable source of drinking water due to higher salt contact from contact with ocean water. And we can also provide all of you with a copy of this letter. There's also 2 websites that are added, and then in closing, JRM and MCBCB are dedicated to fulfilling our environmental commitments. I strongly believe that our robust environmental stewardship is critical to sustaining training ranges in direct support of military readiness. Joint Region Marianas and MCBCB will continue to work with our governmental Guam partners to implement DoD-funded upgrades to civilian infrastructure that are protective of marine and groundwater resources. Cleaner treated wastewater via upgrades to the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant and outfall monitoring of groundwater quality via the Northern Guam Lens aquifer, monitoring well network rehabilitation and expansion, and aquifer pollution control through civilian roadways, storm drain, and sewer line improvements. Thank you for assisting us in our response to the constituents' concerns, and please don't hesitate to contact me if you have additional further questions or constituent inquiries. Sensor Ramente Gadala E. Kratzer, Chief of Staff. So we'd like to thank Joint Region Marianas for being responsive to the questions, and they're answering the concerns of the community. So we thank them for that. We really appreciate that. Okay, now we will start. Samantha Barnett, please proceed.
Hafiday, Honorable Senator Nelson, Honorable Vice Speaker Munya Barnes, thank you for sponsoring this roundtable and for providing us with the opportunity to share some of our concerns with you. Senator Perez, Senator Brown, and Senator Taidigui, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. My name is Samantha Barnett, and I am a project manager for Protect Guam Water. Our youth cohort will also be presenting here today. I'll let two of them introduce themselves and tell you about our group.
Okay. Buenas half a day. My name is Isabella Olalia. We are part of Protect Guam Water, an Indigenous youth leadership program under NIHI, which provides youth with a hands-on media advocacy opportunity through a hands-on leadership learning program dedicated to protecting Guam's land and water resources. Today we are here in defense of our ocean and coastline, as well as our primary source of water, the Northern Guam Lens aquifer, or the NGLA, which provides water to approximately 75 to 85% of our community, including both local and military families, as well as visitors. The massive firing range complex currently being constructed over our primary source of water is a dangerous gamble with arguably our most important resource, the health of our community and future generations.
Hafaday, my name is Haani Benaventi Sanchez. Today we will be sharing data and information from various studies and reports that calls into question and counters the Navy's conclusion that the firing range complex in construction over the northern aquifer would have no significant direct or indirect impact on our aquifer. As Indigenous Chamorros, we believe that the land and the ocean are quite literally our ancestors, and that we are obligated to care for them in the same way that we would care for our grandmother and our grandfather. We ask that you consider this obligation to future generations as we share our concerns with you.
Half a day, everyone. My name is Alexia Chargalov. In 2015, the government of the Northern Mariana Islands contracted a legal firm to assist with reviewing the CNMI Joint Military Training, EIS. The CJMT included plans for live fire training on Paga and Antinian, similar to the training which would take place on the range complex currently being constructed over a primary source of water. One concern raised was an omitted study released by the United States EPA in 2012. The 2012 paper looked at a wide range of munitions, chemicals, and propellants left in the soils of over 30 military installations and firing ranges in the U.S., including Hawaii. This included heavy metal residues in soils and, in a few cases, in groundwater. Jim Keeney, the director at the time of Environmental Associates, an environmental consulting firm and a member of the contracted team, stated that, quote, "The results of the study show that there is a wide range of chemicals that are left in soil, many of which can be mobilized by rain and travel to groundwater. This is a particular concern because the karst limestone geology of the islands is relatively porous," end quote.
Senator, we have an attorney from that legal firm that has joined us today by Zoom.
Okay, thank you very much. So this attorney is from off island, and what is his name?
This is Matthew Adams.
Okay. Half a day.
Half a day, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to join you. My name is Matthew Adams. I led the legal team that worked for the CNMI government in response to the CJMT project in 2015, 2016, as just mentioned. And Protect Guam's Water just asked me to briefly say a couple of words about the issue on Tinian that came up in that project and appears to be coming up here again. So, as the honorable senators have been just now made aware, one of the many concerns about CJMT was DOD's failure to account for the risk to aquifers from live fire training. That risk is well known in the scientific community. At this point, I think it's fair to say it's beyond reasonable dispute. It's the subject of published academic research, and maybe more importantly, it's also the subject of an issue paper from US EPA, which has jurisdiction over it. What all of that research tells us is that the risks are especially high where geology gives contaminated runoff an easy path to get into the aquifer. In those environments, contaminants that get picked up at the surface never get filtered out as they might in other environments. That was the case on Tinian, where the Lens aquifer is overlain by karst, and that's also the case at Northwest Field, of course, which has those same features and gives rise to those same concerns. So really, these live fire ranges do present a serious risk to drinking water. Now, DOD's supplemental EIS for the relocation project admits the Northern Guam Lens aquifer is fragile. It also recognizes the porous karst formations around the firing range site at Northwest Field. But it doesn't squarely address the 2012 EPA issue paper. It didn't provide detail on current, in other words, pre-project, pre-firing range aquifer conditions. And it doesn't provide specifics on what will happen if contamination is detected in the aquifer. What exactly will be done, by whom, and with what resources. There's some vague statements about investigating alternative designs, alternative technologies, if necessary, via the REVA model discussed earlier. But that's not yet set up fully locally, and normally it's an analysis that runs just once every 5 years. And with the resource of this importance and this sensitivity, it's just too risky from an environmental perspective to kick the can down the road in that way without any specific commitments. These are issues that DOD should be expected to really nail down before the ranges are complete and before live fire training begins. I'll leave it there and turn it back to the next speaker, but again, thank you for your time and for the opportunity to join you.
Thank you very much.
Hafaday, my name is Riley Duenas. The firing range complex that is currently being constructed over our aquifer consists of 5 ranges, including a rifle range, a pistol range, a non-standard small arms range, an MRF range, and a multi-purpose machine gun or MPMG range. The range footprint, or the area where the range is being constructed, is the process of being entirely cleared of vegetation, which serves as a natural filtration system for the aquifer. According to the final SEIS, over 6.7 million rounds of munitions will be fired every year at the LFTRC. Noise from the range will be heard throughout the Ratidian Wildlife Refuge. The proposed action also includes an area developed a hand grenade training complex at Anderson South for the M67 fragmentation grenade. 421 hand grenades will be thrown at the HG range in Anderson South every year.
Before we begin, I want to define several terms for the sake of understanding. NGLA refers to the Northern Guam Lens aquifer. MCs are munitions constituents. Munitions are military weapons, equipment, and supplies, including bombs, guns, and shells. Constituents are what something is made up of, its ingredients or parts. Munitions constituents is then defined in U.S. Code Title 10 as any materials originating from unexploded ordnance, discarded military munitions, or other military munitions, including explosive and non-explosive materials, and emission, degradation, or breakdown elements of such ordnance or munitions. Today, we're going to focus on 5 alarming problems with the operation of the firing range complex. We've labeled these problems A through E. Problem A, munitions fired at the training ranges have the potential to leak munitions constituents into the groundwater and to contaminate the Northern Guam Lens aquifer, or the NGLA. From the final SEIS, page 2-10, 1, the NGLA is designated as Guam's sole source aquifer, providing 85% of our drinking water, and is composed of 6 subbasins. The live fire training range complex is located at AAFB Northwest Field, sits on top of the Finnegodzin and Agafagumas subbasins. For reference, the LFTRC is adjacent to the Texan. The standalone hand grenade range in Anderson South sits on top of the Jigo-Tuman subbasin. As previously mentioned, over 6.7 million rounds of munitions will be fired every year at the LFTRC, and 421 hand grenades will be thrown at the hand grenade range in Anderson South annually. The weapons and range munitions proposed for use at the firing ranges can be found in the final SEIS 2-10, Table 2.2-4. The LFTRC located at North Westfield to include a known distance rifle range for the M16 and M249 SAW, a known distance pistol range for the M9 or 9mm, a non-standard small arms range for the M16 or M4, a modified record of fire range for the M16 and M249, and a multi-purpose machine gun range for the M249, M40, M110, M240, and the 50 cal, the MK19, and the grenade launcher. The hand grenade range for the M67 fragmentation grenade. The final SEIS does not expressly identify all munitions constituents. MCs from use at the training ranges are concerning because of their danger to human health and the environment. Given the porous nature of limestone underlying NWF and Anderson South and the ability of rain and surface water runoff to percolate rapidly through limestone to the groundwater lens beneath, there is cause for concern of water contamination. The draft FEIS discloses on page 5-83 that lead ammunition would be used and that lead, along with other heavy metals such as nickel, chromium, cadmium, and copper, tend to accumulate in soils at training ranges, but are not very soluble. The final SEIS discloses on page 5-333 that munitions constituents associated with small arms ammunition commonly used at operational ranges include lead, antimony, copper, and zinc. The following is not an exhaustive list, but is specific to munitions used at the training ranges. Lead is a toxic metal that can be harmful to human health even at low exposures. It can bioaccumulate in the body over time. The EPA issue paper states on page 34 that nitroglycerin is the second most abundant component in military small arms propellant. NG leaches into rain and soil. In response to US EPA, but not in the final EIS discussion on impacts, Department of Navy discloses on page G .2-1448 that munitions constituents specific to explosives used at the hand grenade range include TMT, HMX, RDX, and peroxylate. The US EPA technical fact sheet lists nitrotoluene as widely used as an explosive. It is a synthetic product that does not occur naturally in the environment and is used extensively in the manufacture of munitions. It accounts for a large part of explosives contamination at active and former US military installations. While it is absorbed by most soils, limiting its migration to water, it is classified as a Group C, possible human carcinogen. The CDC Tox Facts for HMX states that it is used in various explosives such as nuclear devices, plastic explosives, and rocket fuels. It is a synthetic product that does not occur naturally in the environment. HMX is likely to move from soil into groundwater, particularly in sandy soils. Animal studies show it may be harmful to the liver and central nervous system if swallowed or if it gets into the skin. The US EPA technical fact sheet notes that RDX is used in various explosives. It is used extensively in the manufacture of munitions and accounts for a large part of explosives contamination at active and former US military installations. It is a synthetic product that does not occur naturally in the environment. It easily migrates to groundwater and biodegrades very slowly in the presence of air. There is suggestive evidence of carcinogenicity. The US EPA technical fact sheet notes that petroleate, commonly used as an oxidizer in solid propellants munitions, is naturally occurring and man-made. There is persistent contaminant cause for concern detected primarily in the association of sites involved with manufacture, maintenance, use, and disposal of ammunition and rocket fuel. It is highly soluble in water, migrates quickly from soil to groundwater. The final SEIS states on page 5-89 that MCs, particularly heavy metals, tend to accumulate in surface soils. They may oxidize or otherwise react with natural substances, but do not break down in the manner of organic compounds. The final SEIS states that MCs may travel via rainfall through existing sinkholes or depressions containing sinkholes within the range locations. In the final SEIS on page 5-321, it states that 7 features have been identified as sinkholes/depressions that may contain sinkholes within or on the parameter of the live fire training range complex. On page 4-12 of the final SEIS, it states that the recharge of the freshwater lens can occur by rain falling on the surface of the island or through sinkholes and dissolution caverns, which would provide a direct path for surface water to reach the groundwater table. EIS documents do not discuss whether the potential for water contamination is influenced by the construction of the live fire training range, which involves substantial alteration of the surrounding landscape, excavation, filling, contouring, and an increase of soil erosion. This concludes the discussion of problem A, that munitions fired at the training ranges have the potential to leak munitions constituents into the groundwater and to contaminate the Northern Guam Lens aquifer.
Hafaday Senators, my name is Kara Flores Mays. I am the director of NIHI, of which Protect Guam Water is a program. Our second concern, or problem B, the Guam and CNMI military relocation environmental impact statements omit data and discussion concerning MCs. Discussions on MCs at training ranges are sparse. The US EPA in its draft SEIS comments on the LFTRC on page G.2-1448 recognized the potential for contamination of the NGLA. The US EPA recommended that given the importance of the NGLA, that the Department of the Navy discuss the potential for munitions constituents to leach into groundwater, conduct fate and transport modeling, and conduct regular contaminant and groundwater monitoring. The final SEIS briefly discusses lead, but excludes any discussion of baseline monitoring and fate and transport monitoring of potential munitions constituents, such as TNT, HMX, RDX, or perchlorate. On page G.2-1448 of the FEIS, it states, the final SEIS will not be able to verify the site-specific migration potential for any MC until the Range Environmental Vulnerability Assessment and operational range clearance programs are implemented. At the time of the EIS publication, there was no baseline data informing the current condition of the NGLA. On page G.2-1448, the US EPA recommended that, given the importance of the NGLA, that the Department of Navy conduct baseline monitoring before the start of the REVA program, which will not be performed until after the first year of range operation, especially because the multi-purpose machine gun range location includes an active contaminated military munitions response program site, or a burn and dump site. And it would be important to capture any groundwater contamination from this site for baseline inputs to the REVA. In other words, we cannot accurately assess the extent of water contamination without knowing first the current condition of the NGLA. Whether the Marine Corps has collected, is in the process of, or plans to collect baseline data to assess the potential impacts to human health and the environment from live fire training operations remains to be seen. The US EPA released an issue paper in 2012, as mentioned before, Site Characterization for Munitions Constituents, easily searchable online. This paper was omitted from EIS documents. The 2012 EPA issue paper, as mentioned earlier, looked at firing ranges at over 30 military installations in the US and Canada to identify energetic residues left on surface soils from spent munitions. The various field studies conducted demonstrate how compounds may leach into soil and in some instances into groundwater. Studies from the former Massachusetts Military Reservation investigated artillery mortar firing points and impact range, anti-tank rocket firing points and targets, World War II grenade courts, OB/OD areas, maneuver training areas, and small arm ranges, and involved leaching of MCs into groundwater, including metals, dioxins, furans, RDX, HMX, ADNT, DNTs, TNT, and perchlorate. On page 11, the 2012 EPA paper states that the more significant transport of small particles of energetic compounds is through their dissolution by precipitation and downward transport into soil. If MCs are more likely to travel into the ground through rainfall, surface water, and erosion control, best management practices are not sufficient to prevent MCs from leaching into the aquifer. On page 11, the 2012 EPA paper states that once dissolved, RDX and HMX can migrate through the vadose zone and contaminate underlying groundwater aquifers, especially on training ranges that have permeable soils, a shallow groundwater table, and abundant rainfall. On page 32, the 2012 EPA paper states that at open burn, open detonation sites, RDX and HMX were generally found in surface soils at the ranges sampled, presumably from the use of C4 demolition explosives. RDX concentrations in the groundwater near the OB/OD range at the MMR were the highest found at the installation. RDX has also been observed in groundwater near OB/OD ranges at Camp Bonneville, Washington, Camp Grayling, Michigan, CFB, Petawawa, Ontario, and SU Subase, Bangor, Washington. On page 64, the 2012 EPA paper states that perchlorate is rapidly dissolved, does not sorb to soil components, is largely recalcitrant, and thus is highly mobile and can potentially produce groundwater contamination. It also states that energetic compounds, or MCs, are found in the impact area surface soils near targets and low-order detonations, as well as sometimes in groundwater. This concludes the discussion of our second concern, problem B, that the Guam and CNMI military relocation environmental impact statements omit data and discussion concerning MCs.
Hafaday Todu Hanzu. My name is Kiana Tunkap. Our third concern, or problem C, the SEIS does not account for changes or impacts to groundwater flow from future water well pumping and installations, resource demands, and climate change. Our fourth concern, problem D, munitions fired at the training ranges may travel via surface or groundwater to coastal waters and adversely impact coastal and marine resources. There is no discussion in EIS documents regarding potential for munitions constituents to travel via surface or groundwater or impacts on coastal marine resources. Our fifth concern, problem E, no mitigation of water contamination from the firing ranges is proposed. No mitigation plans are proposed for munition constituents migrating to groundwater or nearshore waters because no significant impacts were concluded. Mitigation plans for groundwater are limited to refurbishment of the GWA interceptor sewer system, repairs to public infrastructure, and expansion and rehabilitation of the NGLA monitoring network. Mitigation plans for nearshore waters is limited to upgrading the Northern District wastewater treatment plant's treatment systems. On page 5-327 of the final SEIS, and REVA assessments will not occur until a minimum of 1 year after range operations begins. This wait-and-see approach puts Guam's sole source aquifer at risk by ignoring available data and prolonging mitigation efforts. This concludes the discussions of problem C, D, and E. To summarize everything, problem C, the SEIS does not account for changes or impacts to groundwater flow from future water well pumping and installations, resource demands, and climate change. Problem D, munitions fired at the training ranges may travel via surface or groundwater to coastal waters and adversely impact coastal and marine resources. Lastly, problem E, no mitigation of water contamination from the firing ranges is proposed.
In addition to the 5 problems that we've shared with you, we've compiled 9 questions that we believe that public officials and agencies should ask and follow up on. Number 1, how far along is the construction for each of the following? The modified record of fire range, the non-standard small arms range, the known distance rifle range, the known distance pistol range, the multi-purpose machine gun range, and hand grenade range. Number 2, when will the firing ranges be operational? Number 3, how many acres of limestone forest have been cleared to date for the multi-purpose machine gun range? Number 4, since the release of the 2015 Record of Decision for the buildup, what studies have been conducted to determine the impacts of chemical compounds such as TNT, RDX, HMX, perchlorate, and lead on the NGLA and drinking water?
Number 5, DON conducted baseline monitoring as recommended by US EPA to include data to determine groundwater contamination from Site 52-UXO-4A, MRA 254, Burn and Dump Site -AOC-94 for baseline inputs to the REVA. If so, where can the public access this information? Number 6, what is the status and location of all proposed wells for installation, rehabilitation, and closure? Where can the public access information relative to the status of proposed or active well installation, rehabilitation, and closure? Number 7, the public cannot easily access and progress or status of construction, operation, permitting, and ongoing environmental impacts resulting from firing ranges. Can DoD make this information public available on a website? When? Number 8, has DON consulted with US EPA to determine the relevance of EPA issue paper as it relates to potential adverse impacts to groundwater from munitions constituents used at the LFTRC and HD range? Where can the public access this correspondence? Number 9, what steps is GEPA taking to ensure no adverse impacts on the NGLA results from the firing range operations?
Hafaday. My name is Ha'ani Flores Laysam. While we've repeatedly heard and seen brief explanations on groundwater flow and range environmental vulnerability assessments, or REVA, being cited to support the Navy's conclusion that there will be no significant direct or indirect impacts to our aquifer from range operations, our concerns, as we've shared with you, are with the lack of data presented in the SEIS surrounding the potential for chemicals to leach into our aquifer as they have at other ranges on U.S. military installations. The brief discussion in the SEIS on groundwater flow and the REVA program does not address data concerning the risk for soil and water contamination from munitions constituents such as TNT, HMX, RDX, or perchlorate making their way to the aquifer via rainfall, surface runoff, sinkholes, or other pathways. Studies like the US EPA paper call into question the Navy's conclusion that there will be no significant direct or indirect impacts to our aquifer. Given the importance of the NGLA and our reliance on it as our main source of drinking water, it is critical that we are provided accurate information to anticipate and prevent any threat of water contamination. All across our region, island nations are conserving and protecting resources to ensure the survival of our communities through climate change. We implore you to join them.
Hafaday, my name is Salentia Saladier. Today there are 5,093 signatures and steadily rising on a petition that calls on both federal and local leaders to protect our aquifer. Specifically, the petition calls on the United States Senate Committee on Armed Services to stop construction of the firing range complex, to require an assessment of the environmental risk of the same, including both the impending threat of contamination of the aquifer and the future threat of diminished freshwater resources in Guam, and to withhold all current and future funding of the firing range complex or any associated federal action until strict compliance with this demand is met. The petition calls on the United States Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, to honor the Department of Interior's trust responsibilities and special commitments to Guam, in particular to the native Chamorro people, and to advocate for the protection of the aquifer by directing the Bureau of Land Management to conduct additional environmental and other assessments concerning the firing range complex. The petition also called on Vice Speaker Tina Munya Barnes, chairperson of the Guam Legislature's Committee on the Guam Buildup, and Senator Telena Nelson, chairperson of the Guam Legislature's Committee on Guahan Preservation and Self-Determination, to conduct a roundtable to assess the firing range complex and any potential adverse impacts on the environment, the aquifer, and any and all other water resources. Saina Maasi for responding to this request today.
Again, Sijus Maasi for taking the time to hear us out today. We ask that you consider proposing a resolution in support of the petition. Water is life, and we call on you to protect it.
Is there anyone else that would like to give testimony? Yes? Okay. We can go ahead and rotate, and then if we have questions, we can bring the Protect Guam Water forward, and we can ask them their questions in relation to their group testimony. Can we also get a copy of your presentation today so that we can pass it out to the colleagues? Thank you very much. Okay. This is it?
Yes.
Go ahead and proceed, and just go ahead and state your name for the record.
Buenas and Hafaday, Toruhamzu, and so nice to have all of our senators in front of us. We just want to thank Senator Nelson and Senator Munya Barnes for allowing us this opportunity to speak, and so proud of all the youth here coming out today to stand up for our land and for our water. It's very inspiring to see all of you here matching and and in solidarity. So I am a core member of Putahila Texan Save Retidian. We are a direct action organization, now a nonprofit, that has been working over the last 5 years on issues related to the firing range, including the impacts to our Northern Guam Lens aquifer. We support this roundtable hearing and efforts of Protect Guam Water to put forth a resolution and that supports the petition because, you know, at the end of the day, what it's doing is it's strengthening all of the past legislation that has been introduced by some of you here today. Senator Nelson, you've introduced 2 resolutions, and Senator Sabina also recently, she worked with an organization here to put forth the resolution on the to protect our aquifer as well. So just want to acknowledge those efforts, those previous efforts, and acknowledge the efforts of the more than 40 organizations as part of the Finogi Coalition who over the years have raised awareness about impacts to our aquifer, including, meetings with the governor to show that it is a very critical time right now that we, as a community, need to stay on top of these impacts and, really shed light on this crisis that we're facing. And it's not something that's new. This is something, our issues related to water go back, more than 60, 70 years. And if you go, like, for example, to the Mark Library, you would see that, and I have some documents here as well, that talk about US military bases contaminating Guam's water supply. This is dating back to 87. And it's something that the community has always come together to protect because we understand that water is life. And as corny as that, played out as that statement is, like, that's the reality. What are we gonna do if our water is no longer clean and fresh? And if you look at military studies, for example, there's that threat of saltwater intrusion, and that's something that our brothers and sisters in Saipan are currently dealing with, where their water that they're using to take a shower with is salt water. And they have advisories that are sent out to the community to, for example, clean your bathtub and fill it with clean water because you don't know if on this day that you'll be able to, have clean water to drink. And we don't want Guam to be in that position, so it's just, really important that we, as members of the Whānauki Coalition, to just acknowledge those efforts, acknowledge the efforts of water activists like Auntie Hope Cristobal. Ken Cooper has been working with her over the last few years on water research. Acknowledge Senator Sabina for her work that she's done for longer, or half of the years that I've been alive. And so we just want to come today to talk a little bit about how our aquifer, as Indigenous people, we feel that our aquifer, we are interconnected with our land. It is a part of us. And we refer to our aquifer as our living ancestor. And when you talk about the aquifer, it's hard to separate that from talking about the ecosystem above it, the trees that have been cleared. 900 football fields of land have been cleared, and there are studies that show that the clearing of the trees can impact the ability of the aquifer to properly recharge. And there's more and more research coming out to support that. When you talk about the ecosystem, it's important to also talk about the endangered species that live within it. And so all of these issues are interconnected, and I want to acknowledge the efforts of Julian Uggan and his law firm, Blue Ocean Law, and I'm sure we've all seen the amazing result of the legal challenge that his law firm took on with the Center of Biological Diversity that now requires the Fish and Wildlife to identify and protect critical habitat for 23 endangered and threatened species located throughout Greater Micronesia, and that includes the Mariana 8-spot butterfly. And this particular butterfly is only found in Guam, and high concentrations of it within the footprint of the firing range. So, as Indigenous people, the connection of the forest, of that resource, is all interconnected, and it only makes sense that this area be established as a critical habitat. The place where this exists, the host plants thrive in that area, and the Mariana 8-spot butterfly relies on those plants for its life cycle. So, when we talk about the firing range, when we talk about water, when we talk about the forest above it, again, it's all connected, and you have to acknowledge that connection. And on top of that, when we acknowledge that our aquifer is our living ancestor, we also have to acknowledge the people who have walked the footpaths in that area, including my family is one of 5 families who are the original landowning families of Letuxan, and I am the 6th generation descendant of land there that is set to be used as a buffer zone for the live fire training range complex. And I've been involved in protests since I was 4 years old, and then, I'm still to this day coming out and speaking out on behalf of my Saina, because we were told by my tata that we should never stop fighting. And so I just want to acknowledge also my Saina and my elders who continue to allow us to do this work. And I feel like when there's any conversation about the firing range, you need to include the original land-owning families that are being affected, whose land was stolen. And the legislative record, you can go into the legislative record and see there is a public law there that states that it was stolen by force, deceit, and theft, and I've referenced that previously. So again, I'm here today for my Saina, my elders. My mom usually comes to these public hearings, but we were actually told we could only bring 2 people, so I wish that we had the opportunity to invite more people, but I know there's a public hearing coming that they could attend as well. So I also wanted to mention that there was before a time when discussions about the aquifer that water experts on Guam would be very straightforward about how it will be affected by just contamination. And the reality is that, it seems like we're in this day and age where there are $3 million contracts surrounding this. It's become a very political resource. And so I just wanted to share this old article that I found. And it was written, it was a submission to the PDN by Dr. John Jensen, who is with UOG's WERI, he's a hydrogeologist. And I wanted to just share some of this with you guys because in reading it, I was just at WERI going through some old articles, and I was like, wow, you would never find this kind of description of the aquifer today because it's political now. And so I wanted to share that the way that he describes it here, it's on the headline, a gigantic sponge. It's a gigantic sponge, okay? So he describes it as, and I'm not going to go too much into detail because these ladies did an amazing job already kind of describing the way that the aquifer works, but I just wanted to share that there is, so it states here that the pull, so this is the one section, it's called the pull of gravity. So it says that research at WERI has shown that slowly percolating water moving through small pore spaces can take 1.5 to 2 years to reach the water table. During very heavy rains, however, when the rain falls faster than it can infiltrate, the storm water runs across the surface and accumulates in the nearest depression, either a natural sinkhole or a constructed ponding basin. Water that ponds at the surface takes a different route downwards. Studies at WERI over the past several years has shown that water collected in sinkholes and ponding basins during heavy storms, such as local thunderstorms or island-wide tropical storms, travels very rapidly down relatively, opening pathways reaching the water table 200 to 500 feet below in no more than a few hours, and in some cases, probably only a few minutes. Such pathways can range from openings about as big as one's arm to caves through which a person can fit. So one should think of the aquifer not just as one big sponge, but as a big sponge with some open holes drilled through it. Water that is slowly sprinkled in small amounts on the surface of the sponge is absorbed into the pores of the sponge and percolates slowly downward. Water that is dumped onto the surface of the sponge rapidly and in large quantities, especially when the surface is already wet, bypasses the pore spaces entirely and simply runs down the open holes. So Northern Guam gets about 100 inches of rain each year on average. About 2/3 of it is thought to eventually reach the water table, where most of it accumulates in a layer of fresh water that fills the pore spaces of rock like a fully saturated sponge. The freshwater layer forms a lens-shaped body that literally floats on the denser seawater, filling the pores of the limestone bedrock below it. It's a whole article that really just is very descriptive, that really gives you an understanding of the way that our aquifer works, and it talks about contaminant sources. Potential sources of contamination for the aquifer include effluents from septic tanks, sewage from leaking lines, failed pump stations, pesticides, fertilizers, animal waste, agricultural activities, release of industrial chemicals, etc. Some of these, such as sewage from septic tanks, are released continually into the porous limestone bedrock. And it talks about how when the surface and near surface parts of the aquifer are relatively dry, they temporarily store contaminants from surface sources. So when heavy rainfall occurs, whether from a local thunderstorm or from an island-wide event such as a tropical storm or typhoon, the stored contaminants can then be rapidly flushed down to the freshwater lens. And then lastly, I wanted to just highlight, it mentions, and I want to share this with all of you. I want to actually send it to all of you senators here today to read through it yourself, so it just paints that picture so that we can all understand have a greater understanding of the way that our aquifer works. And lastly, I just wanted to touch on the coastal zone. So he mentions that it's important to keep in mind that the lens eventually discharges all of the water not drawn up by production wells into the coastal zone. Whatever contaminants get into the lens and stay in it until they reach the coastal zone are therefore discharged into our coastal waters. And so, he's pretty clear there that the contamination, it's porous, it's like a sponge, it can seep down into our aquifer. And so, it's just really scary right now that we're in this position where we will have 6.7 million bullets above our main water source, that including grenades. Like, I just want to be really candid, like, what are we doing? What are we doing as a community? It's a really scary time, and we also do have some studies about lead at firing ranges, which, along with this article I want to send to all of you, but I feel like for the sake of not being too repetitive, I won't really share too much about that. And I guess lastly, one of the things that I wanted to mention, and they touched on it a little bit, was Red Hill in Hawaii, that, they are living our worst nightmare, that they're, having to, the military, the Department of Defense told them, no, everything's good, everything's good. It was only until they saw fuel, literally they saw fuel in their water that, and even then, they were still denying it. And it took some time for them to finally admit that the water was contaminated, even though you could see the film of fuel on top. And what some of the attorneys have found is that the way that they were kind of going about doing this was they were raising that maximum contaminant limit in the water reports. And that was how they were skirting, this, they're kind of keeping under wraps that the contaminant levels were high. They just kept raising that maximum amount. And so that is a scary story, and it's also one that just kind of teaches us that we can't just say, oh, well, the Department of Defense, they'll make sure that everything is, just great, and they'll have all the regulations in place to keep our aquifer safe. But the reality is that, and Senator Sabina has brought it up in a previous roundtable, that not all the chemicals that the military uses is covered under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so Telena Texan had a lot of questions at that roundtable, and the responses were insufficient. They couldn't conclusively tell us that there would be no impact to your water source. So why do we want to even place any level of risk? And so we support the efforts here, and we look forward to more collaboration with Protect Guam Water and the Finogi Coalition, and just really appreciate your time today, so Sijus Masi.
Hafide and Sijus Masi, to all the previous speakers and to you senators for staying back and listening to us this evening. My name is Monica Flores. I'm a member of Protect Texan Save Retidian. And I just want to thank Maria, who is a descendant of the original landowners, and she made a really important point that it's very important to invite the families who are affected or are directly impacted, and that I think she's might be the only representative, and that's quite unfortunate. Anyway, Maria brought up the issue of endangered species, and it's really important to look at, we're here to talk about the firing range, and we're here to talk about risks for contamination to our Northern Lens aquifer with the construction and operation of the live fire training range. And it's important to look at it as a cumulative, with the big picture, right? Because the truth of the matter is we have a legacy of environmental racism here that has spanned several generations now. Our people have suffered and continue to suffer numerous harms of our colonization and militarization, including racist and discriminatory treatment by naval authorities, negative health outcomes resulting from the storage and usage of nuclear weapons, radioactive vessels, and toxic chemical agents, including Agent Orange, and massive land seizures to make way for the U.S. military bases and installations. Guam has 19 Superfund sites containing substances so hazardous they require a long-term cleanup response, and nearly another 70 toxic sites. We are already so vulnerable. In fact, one of those Superfund sites is on the Anderson Air Force Base right over our aquifer. And we've actually had conversations with US EPA who have told us, they need to come out here and take a look at it. It's so bad. So all of this is already existing, and now they want to clear over 100. They're clearing over 100 acres for this firing range. That's gonna, you've heard so many people today say close to 7 million ammunitions fired over that aquifer every year. And I also need to make a note that I appreciate your questions being sent to the Department of Defense, but I feel it's really problematic that we started this roundtable with their responses, because now our community has to speak to that information and those responses, aside from all the preparation we've done to come here today. It's a little disturbing, and then looking at some of these responses here, question number 5, for instance, a lot of folks have been talking about, risks of, that come with the withdrawal of 1.7 million gallons of water a day. The SEIS, this letter mentions the ROD, but the ROD itself describes, the record of decision itself describes that same risk of exploitation, heavy exploitation on the aquifer. So it's a little disturbing that, this is the answer, that these are some of the answers that are provided, and that's how we started this meeting. Aside from this legacy of environmental racism, and now with the new threats of the contamination from
Monica, I'm just going to interject to clarify for the record that what we read was in response to the questions given to us by Protect Guam Water.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand
so
that.
It's not from any of our offices, it's from the group.
No,
so
I understand that. That's what I'm saying is that...
What we did was we asked these questions from Joint Region Marianas
Sure.
to see if they had a response.
Sure. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you sharing that, but I also feel I'm taking issue with the privileging of Department of Defense presentation or information.
There was no privileging of the Department of Defense presentation.
Okay, well,
it's
my opinion.
What is done, and what we
Okay.
did is what we were asked to do by Protect Guam Water. So please proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you, Senator. So also with this letter, I hope that Guam EPA, who's present here today, takes a look at some of the same questions, in terms of the groundwater flow toward the coast, because there's a real reef to ridge contamination issue here. We've got, Senyat Manny Duenas here who will probably talk about it, but we're looking at impacts also to our fish. We've been seeing a lot of contamination in fish tissue tests all around the island, directly related to other sites of military contamination as well. And this is all cumulative. We're here to talk about the firing range, we're here to talk about the aquifer, but things are all connected. And the military has historically underreported incidents of contamination, and the public has not been made aware of the impacts to their lives, their bodies, the water that they're drinking in the land. And as I talk about the cumulative impacts, it's also important to bring up that Telena, Texas, and Sabre Tidian also filed a lawsuit earlier this year with Earth Justice against the Department of Defense and the Anderson Air Force Base in their application that they made last year in September to the Guam Environmental Protection Agency for a permit for open burn and open detonation at the explosives ordinance range. And a lot of the contaminants from that, we're looking at lead, magnesium, uranium, as well as PFOS and PFAS. These things are forever chemicals. They do not break down in the natural environment. And so we're looking at compounding this. And so we actually brought for you, senators, today a copy of that lawsuit so you can have it for your information, as well as the news release that goes with that. We also have collected over 25,000 signatures on our petition on change.org that we started about 5 years ago. So we brought you a copy of that as well, and a few other studies. All of this, of course, is related to the great work that these young folks at Protect Guam Water are doing. We really are excited and supportive of their efforts. They gave you a lot of really great information today, and we've been coming to these things for a while, and the responsibility is constantly put back on the community. The responsibility to engage about these environmental injustices are constantly being put on the former landowners or the landowners whose land's been stolen, on the oppressed people. And this is something that we've historically experienced, and it's a shame that we're probably going to be gone, and the next generation can be continuing the fight, and the generations after that, and hopefully not. Hopefully we're able to find policy solutions that will, protect our aquifer, and other policy solutions to also, prevent contamination from other exercises, such as this open burn, open detonation range permit that's being proposed. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to give testimony? Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Duenas, go ahead and have a seat, and please state your name for the record.
Buenas, my name is Manuel P. Duenas II.
Thank you.
I'm representing myself. Normally I represent the fishermen of the Guam Fishermen's Cooperative Association. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well. I just want to share with you people, we talk about this exercise about the water, and I appreciate all the hard, dedicated work that the young people have done. Their research is incredible. But sometimes it's quite baffling that despite all this information, the progression still exists. I just want to share with you, when the military EIS came out, the primary thing that caught my eye is when they were talking about that THAAD missile system. And they said they were going to put it on Guam to protect U.S. interests on Guam. From that, I already knew what the EIS was all about. It had nothing to do with protecting this island or considering the needs of the people and desires of the people. The fascinating thing also, and I'm sure, I don't know this lawyer guy that they have, but I would have challenged that EIS, because I have worked with many EIS over the last 27 years. And there's always a challenge based on the alternatives. There's one alternative that was not put in place. There is a firing range near Paddy Point, existing firing range. The military is using it right now. So why do you need another firing range? You have a pre-existing. And you got to remember, There's 3 firing ranges on Guam, actually 4 now. But the one at Orodi is above. So don't tell me there's no contamination down there on the aquifer. There's one on Haputu. And if you go to Haputu, where they have those big communication balls up there that nobody cares about, there's a stream of about 50 feet red dirt coming down to Double Reef. Double Reef used to be a pristine white beach. It's not anymore. It is totally destroyed because that red dirt keeps... I showed it to Speaker Ben before he died. I said, check that out. And when I asked agriculture, oh, Manny, that's a deer trail. Hey, give me the shotgun because I'm going to get that deer. That's the biggest son of a gun that's ever lived on Guam. But nobody cares, no matter how many times I mention it. You go to Runao, you could see the white cliffs now from where they removed all the debris. You know, if you want to think the military is really concerned, then why do we keep sending former military representatives to attend the build-up meeting? You look at them, the colonels, their majors, former. The last thing you want to put in a meeting for any build-up to talk to the military is a subordinate, because that guy's shitting in his pants, if I'm allowed to say that, because that's what's going on. A general standing in front of him. I was a staff sergeant in the Army with Senator St. Augustine. But if a command sergeant major was standing in front of me, boy, I'm already shaking. Because am I in trouble or what? So when you send these majors and former military people into the room, you think they're representing your interests? And let's face it, the reality is half the people want the build-up because they're making money, and the other half don't. But if you're talking about a cultural value to the people, you can't keep nitpicking all the different battles. You have to put it all together. Even on the council, you can ask Chelsea. I proposed to Fish and Wildlife to return the Tigzan back to the people. You're going to have a firing range on top of a water lens, and you got a cave down there with freshwater pool underneath. You guys didn't know that. You have a containment area pre-war, I think. That's when it was built. All under the fire. You have over 10 nesting turtles on Hinapsan. And they're concerned about the turtles. You dumb chamorros don't eat turtles, so we need to protect it. But they're going to do 50 caliber machine guns above their nesting area. And they're going to shoot out, one famous guy in Guam told me, hey, Manny, calm down, because they're shooting at targets with the 50 caliber machine gun. Shooting at target. The last time I remember a target when I was in the Army, we were shooting at cardboard. And a 50 caliber machine gun goes anywhere from 4 to 6 miles in distance. It can cut one bullet can cut a coconut tree in half. Every minute that 50 caliber machine gun fires, it puts 40 pounds. I appreciate all the million pounds conversion. 40 pounds of projectile in the water, in the most pristine water in the world. Our island is blessed. We're on a pinnacle. We're not in Florida or the Florida Keys. People get confused. We don't live on a lake. Our mountaintop recruits fish, they leave. They get tired of us. People ask me, oh, man, you really hate typhoons? I love typhoons because it's like flushing the toilet. It flushes our reef, cleans it back up because we screw up with the land-based pollution. But no, like I said, I am very frustrated with what the people are going through and they're concerned, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. What about the Azuzu that used to live in the Retidian? Now we're going to tell our people, oh, you can't eat Azuzu anymore because it's endangered. All these ramifications from all these issues. I wish I would like to have a round table of all you senators. to challenge you all on what the environment's all about. Because I've been doing this for over 27 years. I've been so concerned and wrapped up with the people. The animals will always come back. We got 100,000 islands and reefs out there. The ocean is well protected. But the people need to be considered. When I attended the public hearing, when there were 7 agencies sitting to my left, and they looked at me, and they said, oh, we're concerned about the lati, we're concerned about the snails, we're concerned about the trees. There are things on the table already. We have what we call the Federal Sykes Act that says the federal government has to share their natural resources with us. I seen that when I was in the Army in Missouri. The hunters were all dressed in their orange vests to go on base to kill the deer. Here at Anderson, the military spends $1.5 million to hire somebody from the States to kill the deer that we arrest our own people for. Show me the logic. Really? We're so worried about the feral pigs. We kill dozens of them a week and we dump them. But we're going to spend $450,000 to go try and neuter a dog we can't even catch. No, I am frustrated with how things are going. But I'm more frustrated that these young people are here begging this legislature to form a resolution to consider their future. My future's gone, Senator. My future is dead. I probably have another good year or two, and then I'm gone. And I'll follow the path of the past that nobody cares. But all I'm saying to you is that if I were really considering an avenue to challenge this military buildup, and I'm going to be honest with you, I sold my soul to the devil because I said 2 things have to happen before this buildup was even on the table. One is that civil service jobs come back to this island. Our people working for SRF are making $12 an hour. The same people in Hawaii are making $25 an hour. That's not right. So you want to come to my island and make it powerful? Then you're going to pay the price. The second thing, Dodea schools. That's $170 million the military spending on teaching their kids. What about us poor brown people? They open the doors for FAS citizens to come here. So those are the things I would have laid on the table first before you even talk to me. Let me fart in the wind. I'm sorry. Senators, I can go on all night, and I apologize to the public. But I can give you issue by issue by issue on everything you want to know. But at the end of the day, there's one challenge which nobody will ever undertake, and that lawyer, I hope, wakes up, that you look at the range of alternatives, because environmentalists always use that range of alternatives. If you don't consider one obvious one, your whole exercise is dead. And the thing that people in this room don't understand about this whole EIS document, because I think I was one of the few people to have read the entire document, is that it was created by a firm from the States that never came to Guam. So at the end of the day, I apologize for my outburst, my unhappiness, my frustration, but all you guys are talking about is part of the cumulative effect that's happening to this island. You keep joining forces with one group, and that same group wants this other thing on the table. And that's what's going to happen, because nobody cares about us. Like I told somebody in Congress a while back, I said, you know what? You guys banned cockfighting on Guam. But you know what? We don't have 22 veterans committing suicide. They don't. Most of the cockfighters are veterans or police officers. Their suicide rate is the lowest in the nation. But nobody went to Washington and say, hey, dude, wake up. Because we need to keep our people doing things that will make them happy rather than killing themselves. Anyways, thank you very much. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Duenas. Is there anyone else that would like to give testimony before we open up for questions? Okay, let's have the protect. Oh, yes, Kara. Sure. Is he going to come online or? So he wants to speak once more? Okay, sure. Let's bring the Attorney Adams back online to add a couple things. Hafide, go ahead, Attorney Adams.
Thank you. It's clear from the testimony so far that there are important questions that remain to be resolved with DoD, and it's also clear, it sounds like, that DoD's responses really lean heavily on REVA. So to the extent helpful, we thought we would just supplement with a couple of quick points. First, just keeping in mind that the REVA model is usually run once every 5 years to help DoD, quote unquote, manage contaminant risk. And then compare that to what we all just heard about water moving from surface to aquifer in a matter of hours or days. Second, and relatedly, we will look into it, but I don't believe anyone is aware of REVA being used in a karst environment like the one we're working with here. If REVA really is what DoD will rely on here, it's essential to have some assurances that it actually works in this environment. And then last, in thinking through DoD responses that emphasize REVA, important to keep in mind that the concept of a release under REVA is not, as would normally be expected, given the language. It's not when the contaminant leaves the range facility, it's when the contaminant arrives in the aquifer. So whenever there is a release under REVA, there is a certainty that contamination will have occurred.
Okay, thank you, Director Adams. So I'll now open it up to my colleagues if there are any questions. We'll start with Vice Speaker. First, Vice Speaker, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. I just have a comment. I want to thank everybody, Madam Chair, for their presentation tonight. I want to thank Mr. Duenas also for his passionate presentation. For one who's been in this legislature for almost 20 years, I know that this issue has not gone away, and this is one of the reasons why we have this public hearing. And I can't speak for those before us, but we can speak for what we can work on today, and the commitment is bringing everybody to that table and learn some new things today that I've never thought of looking. We were around when we received over 10,000 pages of an EIS that we had to reply to, and we were given a very short time, and we accomplished that. But this continues to be there continues to be moving parts that we need to look, and as policymakers, that's one reason why I said I was willing to listen to hear what else we can do to move forward. So thank you, Madam Chair, and again, all these concerns will be brought to the table, and I will definitely look into this.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Tydegui.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was kind of hoping that we'd have at least the Department of Navy here to answer some of our questions that we have. I'm sure there's a lot of us here who wants to hear the answers now and not in a letter form. It is a roundtable discussion, but without them being here, our questions go unanswered. I'm happy that you brought up Red Hill, the one in Honolulu. I was there in December and spoke with the people that were there. My sister lives near the area as well, and it's scary, like you said, very scary. The military is not perfect, But we definitely don't want them, attempting to do something on this island that's going to hurt our people, because once the aquifer is damaged, that's it. To rejuvenate that, what is it, 100 years to rejuvenate it if it becomes contaminated? We've had a lot of, we had a resolution, 55-36, introduced by Sabina Paris, who oversees environmental. It was a lot of great information was done and collaborated. But I was hoping from them, other than I was really happy that you're just moving forward with the lawsuit against the military. And what is the, I have a question. What is the progress of this lawsuit?
Thank you for the question. And so just to clarify and to read in the record, last year in May, Andersen Air Force Base submitted to the Environmental Protection Agency their application for a 3-year renewal of its hazardous waste management facility permit of open burn, open detonation operations at the explosives ordnance range. And that application acknowledges that those operations may adversely affect culturally significant sites, the marine environment, groundwater quality, and endangered species, among other things. And despite those potential impacts, Andersen Air Force Base failed to prepare any analysis as part of the National Environmental Policy Act. They did not take a requisite hard look at the environmental impacts of the proposed operations. They did not consider a reasonable range of environmentally preferred alternatives, including the no action alternative. And they did not provide adequate opportunities for public comment on the proposed open burn, open detonation operations and reasonable alternatives. And so they violated the National Environmental Protection Agency. And we filed this lawsuit in January of this year. We're represented by Earth Justice and local attorney Rachel Tamanyao Zuzu. And we filed a complaint of declaratory and injunctive relief, a civil complaint. And right now, the military filed a motion to dismiss. And we don't actually want to bring more attention to that. We feel it's par for the course that naturally the Department of Defense would file a motion to dismiss. And so we're working on our next motion in the case, and it's been a bit of a waiting game. So that's where we're at in the case right now. Thank you for the question, Senator.
And thank you for responding. And the group that was here at the very beginning, have you looked at any opportunities for not only Earth Justice? I guess it's a group out of it looks like Washington D.C. That you've worked with, collaborated with in order to file this lawsuit. So my question is on this next group that's here, have you also reached out to other, I guess, activists, environmental activists, to pursue even another opportunity for a suit?
Thank you for that question, Senator. Our primary goal right now is to increase public awareness of what is happening. We've done quite a bit of research and may be asking questions around whether it is feasible to file a lawsuit. However, we are a nonprofit organization. This project did not begin with the intention of filing a lawsuit. And I think that it would be powerful if GovGuam took on that responsibility for resources that should be protected by all of our leaders.
Well, I find out the real true power is in the people. And the nonprofits can move mountains compared to what senators can do, to tell you the truth. So, please, I encourage you to continue to do what you're doing right now. And it's nice to see the next generation. Maria was bringing it up, that seeing now a new generation coming in. Where we're going to lose this battle is when we stop trying. That's when we lose. It's the only time. So we have to continue. You wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to add to the comment that, unfortunately, a lot of this work does keep falling on groups like Protect Guam Water, Telena, and all the groups before us. We are Guahan independent Guahan, our islands are sacred to everybody, going all the way back to OPIR even. Unfortunately, it's the people, it's a burden. This is a burden that the bases put on our lands and our waters and our people. This is a burden on our people to continue this fight, and we do have limited resources as well. It's a people power fight for sure, but it's also an exploitive and extractive practice to keep putting the burden and the onus on the oppressed people and the people suffering directly from environmental injustice. And so we do need our governments to take a stronger position, and thank you for your for the opportunity to be here today, and I want to thank Protect Guam Water for their efforts which brought this roundtable together. But also, I just wanted to say that just like how we're constantly being put in the position of, having to do this kind of work, we're also constantly being put in the position to always privilege and listen to the Department of Defense first, and to outsiders first, to federal people first. And it's something that families like Maria's have had to go through for many generations, families like mine, and all of our people, really. And so that's really where I was coming from earlier today. So I also just wanted to clarify that. I wasn't trying to insinuate anything, any misgivings happening here, but it is something that we're constantly made to do. And you've been to a lot of those scoping meetings. We've had to sit through all the military people talking first. And so a lot of this is a reality of our colonial life, of living in a colony here. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And
thank you, Senator.
And thank you so much. And my last question before I ask EPA is that Senator Brown had to leave to pick up her son real quick, so she apologized for not being here, but she was here today just to hear your voices and hear what I had to say. But I'd like to ask EPA, what are they doing as a government to oversee any kind of type of contamination? I mean, we want to get it before it happens, but what is your role, your whole role into this whole issues with, that area on the base, and what can you and cannot do? And are you working with the U.S. EPA to ensure that, this doesn't, it's like you discovered it after it's already been contaminated. And what we want to do is, avoid that before it even is contaminated. So what is Guam EPA doing?
Thank you, Senator, for allowing me to speak on this. I think, first off, I want to say awesome job by the groups that are presenting. I encourage you guys to continue to fight for our island, continue to fight for our resources. I do want to let you know that I am born and raised here. Mr. Manny Duenas is a very good friend of mine. I'm a fisherman, so I understand all the things that you guys are fighting for, and I encourage it, and I love hearing it from you guys. We at Guam EPA are doing what the laws allow us to do, and we also fight for exactly what you want. I can go over some of the permit conditions that we speak about for the firing range. I can go into the discussion about the OBOD. I'm not sure if this is the proper format to do that, but I'll read some of our permit conditions for the firing ranges that we have. Okay, excuse me. So a lot of the things that you guys had mentioned is based on the EIS and the SEIS, and we did not think that they were all addressing all the concerns that we had. But now that we had to issue the permit, or were requested to do the permit, we put some specific stipulations that are based on U.S. EPA guidance, and as well as our knowledge of our site-specific conditions on Guam. And so some of the things that we put to is that prior to the start of range operations, the owner must submit documentation explaining the specific design, operation, maintenance, and environmental management measures that would be taken to minimize the risk of contamination of groundwater caused by the use of the range. The documentation should include, at a minimum, the following: details of the munitions reclamation program to include methods and frequency of spent munitions, collection, storage, and recycling or disposition. Details of the groundwater monitoring program to include background characterization, frequency of sampling, list of analytes, methods of analysis, decision criteria, which will be used to determine if statistically significant increase for background is observed. A monitoring and cleaning recommendation plan for locations such as drainage wells in infiltration basins where surface runoff may result in increased concentrations of lead and other munitions-associated contaminants. Specific range design, maintenance, or operational measures intended to prevent the migration of lead to groundwater or off-site, such as modification of soil pH, routine addition of soil amendments such as lime and phosphate, maintenance of vegetation, specific design components such as ground contouring, filter beds, etc. This discussion must include site-specific information on the pH and other relevant characteristics of range soils, which may affect the environmental mobility of lead and other contaminants associated with range munitions. Documentation and record-keeping requirements which will apply to the environmental management practices associated with the range. So that is specifically addressing some of the concerns and about the potential contamination that the ranges are doing, may present to our geology and our hydrogeology. And so we are taking the measures that may not have been described by the military, may have been in a lot of people's minds whitewashed out and not needed, but we are making sure that in the operation of range, that this information is provided to us. And again, as a public agency, it will be provided for anybody else that wants to need that or hear that information. We encourage public participation. We want you guys to be part of the decision making. But I must stress this. This roundtable is a great situation that you guys put together. And by no means am I defending DOD. But when the SEIS and the EIS and the SEIS, there is unfortunately regulations and laws that govern public comment period. This would have been a great venue to do in the public comment period during the SEIS and EIS. Now, again, you're doing something that you're saying, give us the opportunity to speak, and no one should ever stop anybody from giving the opportunity to speak. But to follow the guidelines, unfortunately, they exist. Our permit, this perfect example is our permit. When we issue the permit, we give public comment time and speak. And OBOD, we were asked to extend it, and we are doing that. We are open. We have opened our doors to not prioritize or finalize the permit, even though by regulation we should be. So we are listening to you guys. We are hearing your concerns. We want to meet and match what you want to do, but you also have to believe that we are also here to protect us as well as you. One of the greatest quotes I ever heard was from the former president of Palau, when he said, we are only, to the older group like us, we are only here watching the environment and trying to protect it for the youth to use it. So that's you guys. And again, I say, keep the fight up. You keep us on our toes, but trust us also that we are doing what we feel is best for our community. So a lot of the things that I heard about your concerns about this firing range and all the things that were lacking in the SEIS and the EIS, we've addressed, if not all of it, most of it. And if we did not address all of them, we are open to listening to you guys and say specifically what you think we should do. And so that, I want to say, is what we've done for the firing range. Senator, if I could go into the OBOD, since you guys have also brought that up. So the OBOD, the permit by regulation, we should have approved it because they met all the guidelines. Working with US EPA and hearing the concerns of the community, we have postponed our decision on the permit application. We have submitted some recommendations to the military, which basically says, look into alternative technology and remove the proposals that you have in the permit application. One of the things that they have not used the open burning part in over 20 years, so again, I'm just stating the facts. The concerns about people, when people say open burning is polluting us, it's hard to say that when it's not been done for 20 years, but yes, there's a legacy pollution part that we do look into, and we are invested into that. But yes, we are holding out and not approving the permit. We are trying to find the best technology that will work. We are in discussion with legal, both ours and the federal legal, on our full authority of what we can tell DOD. We're at the point that there may be a venue that we can force them to do this, but that's not been decided yet, and so it's in discussion, and maybe I shouldn't be telling you that right now, but we are fighting for Guam. And I hope you guys believe that, because there's no reason for me to lie. I have no ties to DOD. I respect the government that we are. I respect the opportunity to speak. I respect the opportunity to hear you guys speak on what your concerns are. And so, but that doesn't mean we let them do anything. Trust me, I grew up in a time when they sprayed DDT on us. So I know there's things that were done wrong. But that doesn't mean I can just tell them anything. You have to do everything that I want. We have to do it in the right way so that we are responsible as well. And I just want to assure you that the team and family at Guam EPA is out here fighting for you guys. You may not feel it, you may not think it all the time, but we're always open for you guys to come in and talk to us. And believe us, because we do this from our heart. And I'm sorry if I'm missing some things, but we do look out for the betterment of Guam, and I hope you guys understand that. Thank you, sir. I guess.
Thank you, Walter. I think someone had a question here.
Thank you so much for extending the ability for us to work with your office. I think that our leaders would really appreciate that. I did want to mention that when the EIS was first released, several of the youth that you see here were probably like 4 years old. At that time, we did provide a number of comments, endless number of comments. What we discovered was that regardless of our participation in that process, which is a flawed process, we had to file a lawsuit for anything to actually be done, or for anything to change. What that process allowed was for us to express what we wanted or did not want, but our expression did not actually impact the outcome. And so we are committed to working with local agencies. I have called Director Munya several times to ask her about the aquifer, and she has always made time to answer some of those questions. We've begun the process of reaching out to your office to also open up that line of communication as well. And the other thing I really just wanted to acknowledge is Uncle Manny for his, I have felt supported and encouraged by him as one of our elders since the SEIS was released, and I just want to acknowledge the work that he's done for years. I wish that we could give our elders the peace of mind to rest and enjoy life rather than fighting for future generations. They deserve that, and that's why we're here today, so that our children don't have to go through that pain. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge his support over the years and his continued support. He will donate things to events that we're having and show up to all of our events, and we really appreciate that.
Senator, if you don't mind, I just want to add to that. I agree with you totally. Manny is a man that says his piece, and I acknowledge that, and I had to walk out there to thank him because, and he's like, why aren't you mad at me? I said, no. That's the kind of things we need, but again, unfortunately, sometimes we're bounded by law, and we have great senators that want to make our job easier, but again, we still have to follow our guidelines, and but I can say, rest assured, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, team and family at Guam EPA, we do what we're due to try to preserve and take care of the human health and the environment. It may not always seem like that because environmental things don't happen instantaneous. I've been in this field for 28 years. I've been doing legacy pollution and cleanups from some past military mishaps since World War II. Unfortunately, environmental law did not start till the 70s, so it's hard to really be mad at someone that didn't know that they were doing something wrong. It's easier to be mad at them saying that you haven't fixed it right away, and that's what we're working on. It's never good enough until we're back to a pristine environment, and to be honest, I don't even know if that can happen in my lifetime. You know, Manny had said he's got 2 years. I think he's a stronger man than that, and I keep telling him, you're going to be better. It's going to be good, but you know, environmental cleanup is not something that it's not like cleaning your house. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's a hard concept to understand. There's a lot that we could do a lot better. Trust me, I know that, but it's not from lack of trying. And I just ask that you guys have, if you don't believe or you have your faith loses in Guam EPA, come and talk to us. And maybe we can assure you all the hard work that we're doing. Because I know that the team and family that I work with, it means a lot. We don't do this to get paid. By no means do we get paid that we're equal. We can all make a lot more money doing something else. And so we do it because it's from our heart and soul. So we may not always be accessible because we got a lot of things going on, but come knock on our door and we will talk to you.
I just want to clarify that our group does see our local agencies as allies, as family, in fact. I also want to add that sometimes these issues, we think of them as pro-military, anti-military, when in fact military families drink the same water that we drink. They're impacted by the contamination in the same way. They have children that they love and care about just like we do. So in many ways, we're advocating for them as well. We're advocating for anyone that drinks the water on this island, including military families and visitors, as well as our own people.
Thank you, Senator Taigui. Senator Paris?
Thank you, Senator Nelson. So I thank you for everyone for your presentation, and thank you to the community that's here today. I think this is such a critical issue, and we have to come together to prevent this harm on our community and our island for future generations. So I do have a question for Administrator Leon Guerrero. So the permit that you provided, or you granted to, was it the Department of Navy for the live fire training range?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Under what statutory authorization did you receive? So basically, what law are you following that granted you the permit authority?
So we basically used a couple of our oversight regulations. One for the clearing and grading, we used the Guam Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Regulations, which is Public Law 25-152, 22 GAR 10101C, and 10103 for the clearing and grading. For the range operations, we utilized a EPA guidance, which is the best management practices for lead at outdoor shooting ranges, because we do not have direct guidance on this, but we took what the best management practices from US EPA and addressed them to what we felt would be indicative of being preventive and being protective for the environment. And we could get you copies to the senators as well as to the organizations of what we used, and as well as for just their operations of their water lines. We also used some of our lead-free regulations, but that's basically what we utilized to address the permit. So we do not have strict guidelines on outdoor shooting ranges. But again, we did not just blindly say, okay, you should do this. We reverted to documents that US EPA has published, and again, it's not regulations, but it's best management practices for lead at outdoor shooting ranges is what we utilize for the protectiveness of the environment.
Maybe I can invite Captain Bearden, if you can come. Do you mind, are you able to answer any of these questions regarding, because I know you are the chief of the water division. So just an analogy. So Guam EPA has delegated authority for RCRA, is that correct? So now, how does this fall? Does Guam EPA also have primacy when it comes to range permits? Or that's what I'm asking. That's why I asked this question, the initial question.
Yeah. So Captain Bearden is our water chief engineer, so he does not do a lot of RCRA. We only have RCRA privacy under certain programs in RCRA, and the range is not one of them. In fact, some of the things that we've looked at is we don't have primacy, nor do we have a program for range management, and that's why we've utilized the documents that we found, which is the best management practices.
Can you add to that, Captain Bearden?
Well, not with the RCRA, like Walter said, I'm not working with RCRA, but the permit that we issued that Walter was citing was issued under the soil erosion control regulations, which was passed by public law, and it includes a provision in there that we can put conditions in any condition that would protect the environment and public health. So we wrote that condition, we crafted it using the EPA guidance and put that into the permit, which makes it enforceable then under that provision that allows us to put conditions in.
Okay, so what's been brought up today is the munitions constituents. Was there any mention of that in granting the permit?
We've asked them for the list of analytes and the methods that they would use to determine the increase from background. So all of that will be something that they have to provide to us that we will review and go back and forth on until we get a satisfactory monitoring plan from them.
So you're still working with them in regards to this permit?
Yes, the timeline for that condition was before they begin operations. They were unable to give that to us right away, so we extended that out to before they start actually using the range. They have to provide that to us and we have to approve it.
Okay, so basically they can do the clearing. You gave them the permit for clearing, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So the permit allows them to clear and build the range. Operation cannot be initiated until we come up with the monitoring plan and the other 5 or 6 conditions that we put in, that they cannot use the range until they meet to our satisfaction on the chemicals as a concern that may be exposed to the environment, the amount of, they gave a set amount of bullets and ammunition by pounds that they're going to use. And so again, the conditions I read, they have to provide that information, and if they don't to our satisfaction, then they will not be able to operate the range.
So some of the information brought today too was that there was no mitigation plan should there be contamination. Does that give Guam EPA the opportunity to reevaluate the permit?
So I'm not quite sure, and maybe Brian or someone else, Kristen or Michelle can answer. The permit exists to build the range at this point. Any operation cannot happen until they meet our requirements in the permit conditions, and that means everything in our knowledge, on our guidance, based on the documentations that we have and consultations with US EPA on keeping Guam safe, and so there's a plethora of things that we would look at. Again, it's like we have groundwater monitoring, and they have to come up with the groundwater monitoring strategy we have to agree with what they think is up gradient, down gradient, and the best management practices about collecting all the spent munitions that were shot out. Brian, is there other things that we could tell?
Yeah, well, I mean, you read the conditions, so it's documentation. So this is a permit for construction. So it's not a permit for operation, but they have to provide us that documentation before they begin operation. As far as I know, we don't have any regulatory system in place that would require the permit to operate the range.
Okay, so does this fall under the Clean Water Act, the permit?
No, this is a Guam law. So this is under that specific Guam law that established the erosion and sediment control regulations. So this is not a federal permit. It's not a Clean Water Act.
So then US EPA is the one that's supposed to be monitoring. Are they the ones in charge of ensuring the water's safe at this point?
You mean the groundwater or the?
Yes, the groundwater.
I'm not sure how to answer that because there's no groundwater, there's no drinking water wells that are down gradient of the site. So if there were, and we picked up anything in those groundwater wells that were the drinking water wells, then that would be regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. But there are no drinking water wells that will be down gradient of this site.
So does it fall under Clean Water Act provisions then?
Clean Water Act would be for surface waters, and there's no surface waters on the site. And if there's any impacts as far as bullets going to the ocean, that would be the US EPA's jurisdiction, not ours.
But if I could add,
I don't know what their determination was. They approved the EIA.
Right. So if I could add, though, Senator, so we do have one of our stipulations for operation is to establish a groundwater monitoring system, and if that monitoring system comes up or there are elevated hits of contaminants that would be associated with this, then we'd have the opportunity as primacy over groundwater to have them clean it up or to investigate and need be clean up if need be. So even though it may not be part of this, it is part of our mandate to ensure that our groundwater is maintained and cleaned. We put in a stipulation that they're going to monitor based on their operations, and if we have any hits based on the monitoring plan that we have to agree with and not just be submitted by DOD and we say, okay, good, we have to agree with their monitoring plan, and if there is positive hits or elevated hits of contamination, that gives us the authority through our groundwater or our safe drinking water and our clean water to ensure that they address any contamination that may be coming from this facility.
And just to add to that, the Guam water quality standards have standards for groundwater, which are it's all the drinking water MCL. So if they ever exceed those, even though it won't be under the Drinking Water Act, the water quality standards for Guam would apply. Then action could be taken in that case.
What I'm trying to get at, is there anything in your tools that can prevent contamination? Because what I'm hearing is that, okay, the permit was granted, and now we're waiting to see whether there's, we're going to monitor to see whether contaminants come through. And what's being said here is, what can we do? The agency, Guam EPA, what is in your toolbox to prevent contamination?
Well, Yeah, I think that that's what that condition was written for, right? It establishes monitoring plans. It establishes a requirement for them to tell us how they're going to determine when there has been a detection of a contaminant above the background level. It requires them to tell us how they're going to operate the range in a way that prevents that contamination from occurring. It requires design details on the use of sand filters, for example, for the stormwater. So you're not just putting the stormwater into open ponding basins or sinkholes. All those things are built into that condition that they are supposed to come back to us with their range management plans, and it's all based on prevention.
So does that plan have to appear or be provided before any clearing happens?
No, that's going to have to be provided before operations.
So, okay, we'll talk
Yeah,
some
the
more.
clearing is covered by the actual erosion control rules, and they met those with their designs and which they provided to us.
Okay, definitely need follow-up conversation. So I also want to recognize Director Munibrecht here from Department of Ag. And just, I guess the question too, you know, what role do you play in regulation, or have you provided any permits pertaining to the live fire training range complex?
I'd like to invite Mr. Kittigwa up to respond to that. I brought my go-to.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yes, so basically what role does Department of Ag play in regards to regulations and whether you provided any permits for the live fire training range complex?
The role that we have at the Department of Agriculture is basically the statute of Protecting Endangered Species Act. So the Endangered Species Act is what we normally have way or at least a hammer with. Then there's like a bunch of other statutes that applies or may apply that may be included into the action that's proposed. The Department of Agriculture does not have any much input, or they provide input to the construction or the clearing of the activity, the firing range or any military, and we go through that with providing comments. We do our extensive review and we provide comments under the federal consistency, and that's with the Bureau of Statistics and Plans.
Okay,
But we do not give out
you don't get
permit
permits,
issues.
but
Yeah.
you have some role in the endangered species.
Basically, that's like the main goal. I mean, the main authority that we use is the Endangered Species Act. And we collaborate closely with our federal counterparts, the Fish and Wildlife Office, when we discuss or we do these reviews.
Okay, so Manny Duenas mentioned the Sykes Act, and can you explain, you know, what does that provide you, Department of Ag? What kind of authorities or involvement does the Department of Ag have in regards to this act?
With the Sykes Act, we just have the authority, we have like a cooperative agreement to enforce at least, or even to reference the act based on, I guess it would be some of the actions that are being proposed that relates to it. So that's what we will use the Sykes Act, or reference the Sykes Act, as well as any other of the other federal laws that are pertaining to fish and wildlife or the environment.
What does your cooperative agreement state?
God, I can't even think of, do you know what our... Yeah, it's just a joint enforcement of the two agencies. Joint compliance, right.
So basically, joint compliance regarding endangered species, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do they compliance with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, or which agency do you have a cooperative agreement with? Okay. And are you apprised of the survivability studies of the transplants Do they give you that information?
No. Right.
Is that
There's-
something that you should be getting from this agreement? Theoretically?
Theoretically, yes.
Okay. So you should be able to access all types of studies that come from this, because you're monitoring, right? You're co-monitoring or compliance, right? You're ensuring compliance.
We get a lot of our reports with the agreement or, upon request, whether we request it with our counterparts with Fish and Wildlife Services or with, BSP, with the Coastal Management Office. We don't get it directly. They will give us usually a site to look for, and most times those sites are not operating, they're not up. So we don't get those information. We normally get it secondhand.
And sometimes it's provided when there's updates to their NREMP projects. So not necessarily at regular intervals or, quarterly or annual reports. It's not like that. But I think when we have NREMP updates is when we get updates about their projects. And I don't know that, specifically we would get survivability rates. Usually it's the successful transplanting rates, which I guess it can't really be equated to survivability because you don't really know how much died.
Is there a way to amend these agreements so that you get regular reports or other, because what happens if they don't make good on their mitigation plans?
Well, even with the NRAMP, and it's funny because I was just reading through the document you sent me earlier. So not all of the projects are funded. They're just proposed mitigation projects, and whatever receives funding is what is actually implemented. So you may have mitigation projects that are included in the plan that never get started. And that's it feels like that's just what they are. And I don't know that we necessarily have any position or authority to negotiate a change in reporting requirements. I will say that for the most part, those who are charged with implementing the NRAMP projects maintain an amicable relationship with our agency and generally seem willing to share information with us as it's requested, but that's not to say that it's always available or what information we need at the time would be available. And we don't participate with them in the projects that are engaged for the purposes of the NRAMP.
Yeah, because these mitigations are negotiated as part of the biological opinion, so they have to stick firm to certain mitigations. They can't waver on those.
Some of those.
Yeah, some of those. But the NREMs, are a little bit different from the mitigations themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think this is really important when we bring up in the upcoming, so Vice Speaker, when you host your upcoming May 10th hearing, I think it's really important to request these items. All right. So thank you. Thank you for your responses. We'll definitely continue the dialogue. And thank you to the public.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Perez, and thank you to our agency heads and for the dialogue. Thank you to Protect Guam Water. I understand the frustrations. We've been advocating for our cultural rights when we first heard that the military buildup was coming to Guam since 2008, right? And so I was a part of it. I understand, I get it. I see the frustration. I know the fatigue that it causes. I see it in my good friends who continue to work really hard to protect our natural resources and our culture. And I understand that, we're coming here and one of our goals is to draft a resolution from this hearing. And I think also it would be good for us to be present during the May 10th information hearing. Of course, okay, and then the guidelines will be lifted, and perhaps many more people can come for this hearing. And many of the concerns we have here in this roundtable, we can bring forth as policymakers during this informational hearing. So this is a opportunity where the people get to speak first, and then now on May 10th, we are going to hear Department of Navy's response. And also, I do want to explore the avenues and really take action. You're absolutely right. We're writing a resolution, and then what? And then next year, we're going to be coming to the table again and discussing some of the issues that we're seeing. And so really, if you have any ideas on how we can take action, we welcome it. We welcome your recommendations and we welcome your ideas, because we can't do this alone. We also need the community's help, and we don't know everything. We don't have all the answers, and I think that's okay to say that as policymakers, because really, the communities also are the ones that educate us in these type of areas, especially when we're dealing with a lot of the other challenges that we have to mitigate within our committees. So we're open to hearing what your recommendations are for our next way ahead. I'm hoping that we can take some kind of action. I think this is a good forum that we've had where our agencies actually came to the table and we had a dialogue within our agencies amongst our own local agencies and representatives. And so I really appreciate that they came and the invitation was extended. But we want to take action also. It is frustrating. And so if you have any recommendations so that we can move forward with action on top of a resolution, then we welcome that as well. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you, especially the youth, for coming out. And it speaks volumes for you guys to come out and the amount of courage you have to present what you have presented today. So thank you very much. Now that we have exhausted all the items on the agenda, we will conclude this roundtable hearing. It is 7:36 in the evening. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Happy Easter and God bless.